Welcome to the February 2025 meeting. We're going to run through this pretty quick. Membership renewal. If you haven't renewed your membership yet, please head to the website, head to the Facebook group, find one of the event postings. We have an event, a pin post at the top of the Facebook group for renewing your membership. We're right at around 130 or so far for this year. We want to keep that going. Having renewed your membership means that you get to attend club field trips and workshops. It means that you get to participate in our photo review that we're going to have, not next month, but we'll start back with that in April. It also means you have access to our members only Facebook group. There's something on the chat. Let's see if anyone can. Okay. All right. Our meeting location still for the current foreseeable future is going to be here at the Bowen. Obviously, we've got some Wi-Fi issues. Actually, it's not even Wi-Fi. We're hardwired. So we have some internet problems here. This is why we've been looking at trying to find an alternate location, because the internet service here is just not really up to the task. I mean, we have a 10 to 15 second delay just to Zoom. That makes it hard for just this. Imagine how a presenter feels when they are talking about something and y'all at home aren't getting it for 10 or 15 seconds. So we're still considering things. The Quinlan is probably out. They wanted us to change our location. I mean, our night that we meet, and we've already landed on this. We changed it once. Changing it again is problematic. We've already started booking speakers and photo review judges for the year. To have to go back and change all that. Probably not the best thing right now. So I'm going to let Rick come up and start over on talking about field trips. I know we had a great group that went to Wheeler Wildlife Refuge last month. Rick, you're probably going to have to come where you can be heard better.
All right, so I'm going to shout at this computer in the hopes that you can hear me. We did have a good turnout at Wheeler. A lot of fun up there with the sandhill cranes, chasing them all over. And a good participation from both of our clubs up there. This month, actually on Saturday, we go back to Callaway Gardens. It's been 2 years since we did Callaway. This is all about the Cecil B. Day butterfly exhibit, which is indoors and frankly a little sweaty. So dress in layers. You might want to cool off a little inside there. Then we're going to go to lunch on premises, and in the afternoon we've got a raptor show. And if you see that eagle coming straight at you, a friend of mine from the Cobb group took that photograph. That was one of the best ones that came out of the trip, I think. But that's fun. We've got 18 people for this trip coming up Saturday, so I'm excited. A lot of folks will be heading down there. In March, and I just announced this one a few days ago because I was waiting for the guy you see on the picture there, Larry Winslet, to tell me where exactly in Stone Mountain Park we're going to meet. And he still has not told me. And I thought, you know what, I better go ahead and send the invitation out anyway. So I did. He will let me know around March 1st where we're going to be meeting. The event is March 15th. And it'll be somewhere in the Stone Mountain Park. And the reason he's delaying that is because he wants to be sure he knows where the best wildflower opportunities are. He has access to trails that you and I cannot go on without somebody like Larry taking us there, because he's got special access and approval at the facility. I don't think we had anything on here about April, but I would mention April briefly. I just resent the invitation for the extended field trip in April to Florida. We're going to Gainesville, Florida. We'll be hitting Sweetwater Wetlands Park and also Paynes Prairie. And we've got an interesting, like the last couple of years, we'll have plenty of birds there. Obviously the big ones, herons and osprey and eagles and all of those kind of guys. But we'll also have possibly some bison at Paynes Prairie, because they actually have a population of wild bison there. You've got other animals running around on the premises too. So this is a fun one. It's April 24th through 27th. considering 24th is probably your drive down day, the 27th Sunday, your drive home day. It's really going to be two very full days of filling your cards up and wearing yourselves out, trudging around down there, taking these photographs. But it's a big trip, good trip for us. We presently have 13 people signed up for it, which is pretty good. I think last year we had a few more than that. But there's still plenty of time to sign up, and I hope you will. And I won't go beyond April at this point. Not much point in it. And thanks for the time.
Next month, our meeting is going to be Zoom only. Thank you, everybody. You don't have to come here and we don't have to deal with the Zoom issues. Everybody will be on Zoom because our speaker is going to be Mike Moats, and his topic is going to be macro photography and the well-equipped macro photographer. One of the most requested topics for guest speakers or learning for this year was macro. And so, in my opinion, Mike Moats is one of the leading macro photographers in the country. He does photo club presentations all over the country all year. So I think it's a special thing that we've been able to secure him for next month. It will be Zoom only. This month, we have Dusty Doddridge. In my opinion, he's a fantastic photographer. I've known him and his work for a long time. I'm really excited about this presentation on Spring Magic Photography, Exploring Composition and Light. I'm not going to take much more of your time because I know you don't want to listen to me anymore. I'm going to turn it over to Dusty, and it's going to be all him.
How's technology going?
Yeah, I'm going to stop the share so that we can bring up your presentation.
That's good. Lots of folks online. Good to see everybody. I'll try to stay within mic range.
Yeah, unfortunately.
You might want to do a sound check at the outset if you're going to stand out here.
Yeah, I'll face the screen. I'll face the screen and face you guys. I'll do my best.
Well, it looks like this is opening in Windows.
Interesting PDF.
I don't know that this computer may not have PDF.
Okay.
It does?
If you have access to the file, you can right click on it and say open with and see if Adobe shows up.
I did that.
Open with up here at the top here. No, you see it on that. Yep. Doesn't show
That's why I did what I did.
Adobe Reader.
Well, we're just going to share that screen.
That should work fine.
Browser, I guess.
Because I can advance the slide. That's key.
You can just use the arrow buttons.
Just which one goes forward? The right one? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, now we got that figured out. Time for Dusty, the man of the hour.
All right. Hi, everyone on Zoom. Hi, everyone out here in front of me. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you all so much for logging in on Zoom. Hopefully you can hear me okay. A thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Yes? Okay, got some thumbs up. A small delay, that's okay as long as you can hear me. I appreciate the invitation to be here with you all tonight. Always enjoy hanging out with like-minded photographers and talking about photography, something that we have a lot of passion for. Had a couple of revelations lately. I decided to listen to my wife, finally, who convinced me to buy some prescription sunglasses. I'm a lifelong eyeglass wearer, probably since age 5 or 6. And for whatever odd reason, just never decided to buy some prescription sunglasses. And she finally pushed me over the hump. I decided to buy a pair. And it's weird. For the first time in my life, I can actually see outside. which for a photographer usually is an important thing. So I'm pretty happy about that. And I was wearing my prescription sunglasses on my sunny drive down here today. And after I have them on for a few hours, which is a great thing, I forget I have them on, you know. So I checked into the hotel at the hotel desk with my prescription sunglasses on, and the desk clerk came up to me and kind of hesitated and looked at me for a second, which was a little unusual, but I could tell she was trying to figure out, what's this guy doing in here with the sunglasses on? Is he famous? And of course, once I shared my name with her, she was, I'm sure, disappointed to learn that I was indeed not famous. Just got back from a wonderful photo tour in Finland. We had some nice wintry boreal forests there. Only about minus 15 degrees there. And we had a client on our group that was from Minnesota, and he was watching the weather back home. And it was only minus 35 in Minnesota. And he's a pretty interesting character, and said, well, you know what? I really, really hate cold weather. And then he paused for a little bit, and then he said, but I really, really like winter. So thankfully we didn't have quite minus 35, minus 15 was cold enough. But I felt like spring would be a great topic for us this time of year. If you live in most places in the Southeast US, you get a little tired of stick season. Things are brown, things are gray, skies are gray. And there's just, we typically don't have a lot of snow, although we had some in Nashville where my wife and I live, we had a couple of inches. But generally around this time of year, I'm kind of tired of the Southeast winter and am looking forward to spring. So hopefully it's a topic that will get you guys energized about getting the cameras out of the bag. It sounds like you all have some wonderful trips coming up. So I'm excited for you all. So just a little word or two about spring photography. And pulling up this first image from the Smokies, I'll kick off with a quote from John Sexton. It says, I feel quiet yet intense energy in the natural elements of our habitat. A sense of magic prevails, a sense of mystery. It is a time for contemplation, for listening, a time for making photographs. So I wanted to highlight those two words, magic and mystery, and kind of let those be a launching point for some of the presentation tonight. And let me go back one more. Yeah, I think the other thing too about spring, you know, spring is the time for renewal. It's a time for getting re-energized. And as I mentioned, you know, suddenly, we don't often think about it, but suddenly the world is full of color again. And it's as if we've been living in this black, white, and gray world. And when spring really gets going, it's full of color, and color really speaks to our emotions. There's a lot of variety of subjects, as you all know, around here and in the Smokies and other places, whether it's trees or flowering trees or wildflowers, macro work, cascades, stacked mountain ridges, full of color. It's a fantastic time to be out there. So lots of compelling compositions to be made, especially in spring. And maybe I'll pause and talk about that image too. We had a person that was on this particular trip. This is in the Smokies, by the way, that image there. And the guy was asking me, well, I like your photographs from the aspen groves in Colorado. Can you show me a place in the Smokies that looks a lot like those aspen groves? I thought, yeah, I can't really think of any place like that. But I just kind of had it in the back of my mind, and we were hiking together. I believe this was in the Elkmont area, and just happened to look up into the canopy and saw this kind of canopy where you had a lot of really, really straight trunks of the younger trees. And it kind of reminded me of those aspen groves in Colorado. I said, hey, let's just stop right here. You know, you're not going to find an aspen grove in the Smokies, but here's a section of the canopy that's going to give you that same kind of feeling with those tall, narrow, thin lines and the vibrant greens of spring behind them. So yeah, that was just kind of an interesting spring surprise, if you will. Okay. Magic and mystery. What in the world do we mean when we mention those words? When I think of magic, I remember watching magic shows on TV when I was a kid, and there was always just something surprising, something interesting. And I think that's what makes a photograph compelling, if it's surprising in some way, something that maybe we haven't seen before. And when I think of the word mystery, I think of an unanswered question. So when I think of what makes photographs strong, is that they're more about asking questions than providing statements. And so mystery is about unanswered questions. The trick, though, is how do we infuse magic and mystery into our photographs? So that's the trick. So when I think about magic, I'm thinking about special places. What are places that are unique? What places maybe that I haven't seen before, maybe a lot of people haven't seen before. I'm also thinking about special conditions. What's a unique condition where that maybe doesn't happen very often? I think about unusual compositions, and maybe we'll talk about some of those things tonight too. And of course, last but certainly not least, interesting and unusual light. So any of those four things, I think, can infuse a little magic into our images. And if you're really, really persistent and really, really fortunate, you might get maybe 3 or 4 of those things into one image. And so that's really cool when all that happens. Rare when it does, but exciting when it happens. Mystery. When I think about mystery, I think about hidden light sources. You don't really know where that light is coming from. I think about mystery and the use of shadow quite a bit. And when I think about mystery, I'm thinking about using less context. We don't really know what we're looking at. Is it a macro shot? Is it an aerial shot? I don't know what I'm looking at. And that's what causes the mind to kind of explore, engage with an image a little bit longer. And again, composition that asks questions, that are subtle, that have more layers to them, usually are going to have a little bit of that mystery in them. So that's a little bit of a setup for the next thing. And now we're going to start looking at images. We can talk about mystery and magic. If you have questions either online, I'm assuming they can chat in if we have access to that. And certainly the folks that are here, if you have questions, feel free to fire away. This is an image that I made a little bit less than a year ago. And when I think about magic and mystery, this image kind of comes to mind. This is actually an Olympic National Park. And it's the beginning of spring there. It's a lot of vine maple that grow in the forest there. There's a lot of interesting little cascades. And so I've taken photographs of red buds hanging over the creeks in the Smokies. That's a March time of year. Travis and I were talking about that earlier, red buds and dogwoods. And I've never quite seen a maple tree hanging over a creek quite like that. So we were hiking along the side of the creek and just happened to look over, and I thought, well, I'm going to jump in the creek and see what it looks like. And it just so happened that the way the maple tree kind of framed the cascade, I thought was really, really unique and compelling. So it was this unique kind of coming together of spring and this cascade and really soft light. And just to kind of throw a question out to you early on, how long do you think that exposure was?
20 seconds.
It's a good guess. 3. I got 20 and 3. Anything else? 13 seconds. And that's one exposure. Now, if you know photographing trees and or wildflowers and macro stuff, 13 seconds is just almost unthinkable to do in one exposure. But remarkably, that worked out. Yeah, completely zero wind. This is probably at sunrise or slightly before, so probably the calmest time of day. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Get it off of here.
I don't think that's part of the composition.
Not part of my composition. The yellow arrow is not included in the creek shot.
It was what you call a surprise.
It's a new Photoshop trend, though, including arrows into your image. Part of the mystery. Exactly. There's a floating arrow following me in the forest. And so many of you, if you've spent time in the Smokies, you will recognize this particular cascade. One of my favorites, maybe not my favorite composition from that location, but I love this image as sort of a little bit of that mystery and magic here. And what I like is this birch tree coming into the frame from the upper right. In my mind, kind of a metaphor for spring, reaching for the cascade, reaching for spring, which is usually how I'm feeling on a day like today when it's about 25 or 30 degrees, it's windy, and I feel like I'm reaching for spring. Spring cannot get here fast enough. So whenever I see this particular place or this particular image, it sort of is a metaphor for me that speaks to reaching for spring. And there's about 2 weeks, I would say, we were, again, talking about this a little bit earlier, in the spring forest where the leaves are at their brightest green. So if you're in the Smokies, it's probably the last 2 weeks of April, maybe into that first week of May. And those leaves take on a lime green. And when that soft morning light hits them, that just creates a glow. It's just a unique time of year. It's my favorite time of year to be in the park by far. So again, reaching for spring, strong metaphor, that tree branch sort of pointing us towards that soft light on the cascades there at Spruce Flats. Another interesting, surprising kind of composition. We've done a couple of tours in the Redwoods and Oregon coast. This is looking at redwoods, and it just so happened to be some, again, very small maple trees that were growing along the edge of the trail, which were interesting in and of themselves. But as I was able to kind of move back underneath the maple tree, I thought it was a great kind of juxtaposition, if you will, between the small sort of patterned maples and the dramatic, strong, sort of hard lines of those redwood trees in the distance. And with that soft light kind of hitting the backside, you've got some backlit maple leaves that sort of are glowing against those darker redwood trunks. Thank you. Thank you. And again, these are images that they're not going to happen again, right? We went back either the next year or 2 years later. Well, that maple tree looks completely different. So that composition doesn't happen again. And so again, for me, that's part of that magic. It's this, I think that's what makes photography so cool. It's this unique moment where time and place come together. And as a human, we get to experience it, put a frame around it, and express something that we prefer through that frame that we can look back on, enjoy, and even perhaps share with other people. So to me, that's the unique gift that photography is. Unique time, unique place, human gets to experience it, and we express something through it. And it's not going to happen again, especially in places like that. What's to say about that? That is a really interesting place along a creek in the South Island of New Zealand. And I just remember hiking along the creek, looking across and thinking, that is like a real life terrarium. It's almost like an entire sort of just whole ecosystem growing on a boulder. And I just stood there and just was mesmerized by all that, because I was just trying to sort out all of those things that I was looking at. So nothing complicated about the composition, but I just felt like it was this sort of magical, fantastic place that just did not seem real. It's just so rare to see almost like a whole forest ecosystem growing on top of a boulder that just so happened to be hanging over the creek. So pretty magical kind of place. Back to the redwoods, springtime. This image I like a lot. Again, that unique moment where we have this beam of light that's somehow making its way through that gigantic forest, and it's spotlighting the rhododendron that just so happens to be growing at the base of the redwood tree. but I like the mystery, going back to mystery that's contained in the image here. We have lots of shadow. We have this transition from light to dark, and we have lots of layers that are pulling the eye through the image after we land on that rhododendron that's kind of in an odd place. So we talk about compositions and all sorts of things. This is actually almost in the corner of the frame, which is kind of an unusual composition. So that's one of the things that we mentioned earlier. It's a little bit different than what you might expect in terms of where we put that visual interest. But I love how that image flows kind of from right to left and from front to back. And there's lots of layers, lots of mystery, lots of unanswered questions about this image, at least for me.
There's something else on this one that really gets me is, yeah, the brightest thing in the image is in the lower right corner.
Yep.
Which a lot of judges would say you don't do that.
Right.
Because it's gonna pull your eye to go left to right, you know, it's gonna pull your eye right out of the frame, and it doesn't. And
Right.
it's because this is one of those cases where breaking the rules is the right thing to do. Because you've got enough light and maybe some mist or something on
Yep.
the left side there.
Yep.
So you do kind of sweep in this one backwards. You kind of go from right to left, and then some of that is also the depth, the layering of the depth.
Yep.
Rhododendrons here, and then the tree is gorgeous, the detail on the trunk. But that's further back, and then further back still is the stuff on the far left. So it kind of draws your eye opposite.
It does.
Works. It really works.
I'm happy to hear that. It resonated with me. It was one of those things where I don't know how long that scene lasted, but I'm going to say it was probably less than 60 seconds, you know? So it's just one of those things where, you know, if you persist, you go back to places over time, you get to know them, you find yourself more often at right time and right place. And sometimes you make the shot and sometimes you don't. And that was just one of those cases of being in the right place at the right time. But definitely for me, had a lot of that magic and mystery in the image. Another cool spot, Olympic National Park, similar creek going up the side of the hill, and just love the simplicity of that, you know, with the Trillium kind of in that lower right, kind of in that sort of classic location or close to it. And you've got the strong diagonal working its way through the frame, that creek, and you've got the moss in the foreground and in the background. And again, just for me, that speaks to spring. When I see the wildflowers and I see the moss coming alive, I see those fresh cascades flowing through the landscape, really speaks to that magic and mystery of spring. This actually was about 3 feet from a road in the Smokies. This is Tremont, one of, I think, Travis's and one of mine, and what a lot of people's favorite locations are. And we were just exploring some cascades.
Check the chat.
Yeah, go
Because
for it.
It popped up a couple of.
Yeah. It's a strange human in our midst over here.
They're just asking for a little more about
Okay,
some of your technical side of things.
okay. I can talk about this image and I'll take a pause and see if there's more specific technical questions. Thank you for your question, whoever submitted that. But yeah, this is obviously an image that is full of spring color. So it's filled the frame with color. There's lots of pattern and texture there with the ferns and really, really soft light. So again, there's only going to be a couple of weeks out of the spring where you're going to be able to find ferns in that sort of pristine condition. And so that sort of fresh foliage really appealed to my eye. Yeah, questions about technical. When I'm photographing water, for example, in the Smokies, I'm almost always photographing with a polarizer just to kind of reduce a little bit of the glare or reflections that might be on the rock or whatever. And I'm almost always shooting in really low light. So I'm frequently not using an ND filter in those kinds of scenarios because the exposures are 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 15 seconds already. So hopefully that answers maybe at least part of the question.
Do you use a polarizer much for images like this?
Not often unless there's maybe some moisture that's on the leaves and you kind of want to cut the glare that's on the moisture on the leaves. It's a good question. Well, they are bright. So we were discussing a little bit earlier about Photoshop. You know, I came along in the film days, and perhaps many of you have also. You know, back then it was just sort of unacceptable to even crop an image. It's like, well, if you're not getting it right in camera, well, then you're not really a photographer, you know. So I kind of come from that tradition, for better or for worse. I'm very thankful to have spent time photographing in the film days. So I like to get it as close as I can to what I want in the camera, and then sort of process things lightly. That's just my own aesthetic. That's not anything that I'm dogmatically putting out there for anybody else to follow. But that's just kind of the tradition that I grew up in my photography in. So there's probably a little bit of contrast pushed in there, but not much. I think we have just lost our forward arrow. Bear with us.
It wants to know which one you're on.
Okay.
So because I had clicked on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Back to live. Yeah, this is I think a cool photo. It's in Mount Rainier National Park, and as wildflower season comes along, again, it's just about filling that frame with color, with texture, kind of a very shallow depth of field. So if you do have maybe some wind that you're dealing with, and focus stacking might be super annoying to kind of deal with in your post processing, then, you know, hey, bump up the ISO a little bit, open up your aperture super wide, and just play with that particular effect. But I love that special magical time, especially in alpine environments, in an alpine springtime meadows, where it's just wildflowers as far as the eye can see. And so I love to just fill the frame. I don't need every photograph to have Mount Rainier behind it to really speak to that wildflower in spring kind of magical experience. So from the great state of Georgia, right, we have to represent some photography here. This was on a camping trip that I had, I think, a little bit over a year ago down to Cumberland Island, which I thought was just absolutely fantastic. Didn't get good luck with fog, but it was okay. I was camping down the road and just enjoying this sort of maritime environment with the live oak trees, the Spanish moss, the palmettos. It's just a very unusual combination of an ecosystem that really had a ton of appeal to me, and I definitely want to go back. So if you guys can order up some fog for me next time I go back down there, then right. So I have some fog pictures coming up, but I don't know. I just had a blast down there. I was camping by myself, and just me and some wild hogs back there at night, a few snakes, wild horses on the beach. Those were pretty cool. But riding the bike up and down the roads there, just, I don't know, it was just a really different experience, and just had a blast. But I think it's getting back to magic and mystery. Just, I don't know, when I think about live oak trees and the Spanish moss hanging down from them, it's a very magical, mystical kind of environment in and of itself, whether it has fog or not. Okay, special conditions. Speaking of fog, I'm checking my watch, make sure I'm not keeping you guys too late. This is a cool place in Olympic National Park in springtime there. We do some photo tours there. And this is a particular forest, part of the forest, that's very interesting on its own. And for a number of years, we had seen fog kind of at the very top of the forest, but never completely descended down into the forest as we would have liked. And this was one of those days where we had about half an hour of fog in that particular forest. So when I think of special conditions, it has to do with light and fog and atmosphere of all sorts. And again, that's in particular what adds mystery. Definitely that fog. Back to redwoods, interesting layers with ferns in the foreground, older, larger redwoods on either side, framing the smaller redwood that's in the center of the frame. So again, can't see a lot of detail of what's in the distance, but you see the shape of the tree, the limbs, you've got lots of layers going through there. So that fog is really helping to add that magic and mystery in this scene also. Longtime favorite, Sparks Lane. I'm not sure how many visits I spent to Sparks Lane before this particular year. I'm not sure what year that is. I want to say it might have been 2014. But I made a ton of photos that morning because it was one of those special years where that dogwood was as full as I've ever seen it before or since. And you have the fog that was filling the cove, which it frequently does. But then you also had that soft sunrise light coming in from the left of the frame, which was gently illuminating the dogwood blossoms and the sides of those trees that run along both sides of the lane there. So have images with more fog, some with less on that morning, but that was one of those. Probably had been there a dozen or 15 times. Never really seen those conditions, but that particular year, everything lined up. Magical. Sparks Lane, can't beat it. Clearing storms, arriving storms, those are special conditions. You know, you got to be safe out there if you're up high, you know, in the mountains and storms are coming through or departing. But that mist arising from those stacked ridges in the Smokies, it's a great time to be up in the high ridges, and you see all sorts of different colors and very, very compelling photography. That one I haven't seen up there before or since. That's from Klingman's Dome, or the place formerly known as Klingman's Dome. And that's a cloud inversion. And it was pretty wild. There was nobody else up there except for two other guys. I think it was Ian Plant and Joe Rossback, some of the buddies that I get to present with from time to time, and another friend of mine. But this was right before sunset. So we're looking mostly west. As those clouds are kind of ripping over the top of the mountain ridges. They have blue kind of from the sky directly above them, but then also the yellow highlights from the setting sun. And of course, that sun star right there on the horizon. So I don't know how many times I've been up there, 50, 60, who knows? I don't know. Haven't seen that before or since. So again, very, very special conditions that has some of that magic and mystery to it.
So speaks to the need to revisit places a lot.
100%. That's a whole topic in and of itself.
Because you've said it a bunch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll pause on that topic. I did a podcast interview earlier in the week, and the question was, you know, what do you prefer? Do you prefer going to new places, or do you prefer to go back to places that you know really well? My answer, of course, was, well, both. You know, I love the excitement, the adventure, and a little bit of the unknown about going to new places, right? That's fun. But then I also love going back to places like the Smokies, places that I've been going to for 25 years now, and I know them really well. And then I can maybe not worry with compositions that I've already, you know, the Captain Obvious compositions that I've already done, you know, a bunch. And I can kind of maybe be patient and wait for interesting and unusual conditions, or maybe explore some interesting and unusual compositions that I just haven't thought about before. So I think both are fun and enjoyable, but I do like returning to places over and over again, because there's always something new, always something different. And if you're working on a project, a photo book or something like that, you can really make a lot of different images and really round out your portfolio of work from that location. Same spot. In fact, the last three images are from the exact same location. I have a 15-foot long spot that I like to set up at sunset at the dome. And all those images are made in the same spot. But again, clearing storm at sunset, light beams coming through, lighting up the different stacked ridges with interesting colors along the way. So unusual conditions. Not a spring photograph, you might say. Well, yes, it is. That was photographed in April from that same 15-foot stretch of sidewalk. Frost completely covering the evergreen trees in the foreground there, right? So unusual conditions, right? Fog, mist, Mount Rainier, alpine meadows there. wildflowers that just go into infinity as far as the eye can see. And just love it when a background that might be busy or might be distracting and you have fog or cloud or something else, it just kind of simplifies that background, adds a little bit of mystery, really have a compelling set of conditions with fog and cloud like that.
Question on that one.
Yes, sir.
Would you focus stack a shot like that? You shoot one close and one far, or
We have to repeat the question. I don't know if the people on Zoom.
right?
Yeah, okay, so the question is this image that we see here a result of focus stacking? And the answer is, in this case, yes. That's a little bit tricky because that's probably about, I don't know, 5 to 7 different images. There's probably still a little bit of breeze, so you're trying to navigate that when you're putting those back together. But in that case, that image is definitely 5 to 7 images put back together. I don't always do that. Sometimes I love that shallow depth of field that we looked at earlier.
This one looks sharp.
Yeah, it's definitely a 5 to 7 focus stack. Thank you for the question. Also a focus stack there, very different location, Crested Butte, sunrise. Again, just amazing conditions. The wildflowers don't always look like that every year. You know, that was one of those years where they were waist high as far as you could see in one of the locations like this in particular. And it just so happened to be sunrise after the rare storm clouds kind of hung around overnight. And so you had this very colorful sky, and you just had this incredible foreground of Columbine wildflowers. It just seems to go into infinity towards Mount Crested Butte. So again, just very, very rare, very unusual conditions that just come together. And again, as Travis pointed out, just got to keep going back. Just got to keep going back. Compelling light. We can't have a photography presentation without talking about compelling light. Yeah, check the chat.
Just in case.
We're going to
that
do a
was
chat
something-
check.
Just in case it was related to how do you choose the type of lens for your work, prime versus zoom?
Okay. Good question. We'll pause there. Prime versus zoom.
I'm just gonna click back there again.
Okay, there we go. I think prime versus zoom is the question. I think back in the day, primes were, I think, probably quite a bit sharper than zooms. Not the case anymore, I don't think, in my observation. I'm photographing on the GFX system, and I had a, I don't know, roughly like about a 20, 24 millimeter prime, and then they came out with a 20 to 35 zoom. The zoom is at least as sharp, maybe even sharper than the prime was. So I like a lot of wide angle shots. I think there's cool stuff you can do with that. My favorite lens, even going back to my Canon days, is the tilt shift lens. That's a whole nother probably topic of discussion, but we don't really need it as much for tilt now, at least for what I do, but it's lovely to work the shift function because it allows you to put together compositions with a lot of different aspect ratios than what you would otherwise end up with our unfortunate, in many cases, 3:2 sensors. So I love aspect ratios that are not 3:2. And if you want to read more about it, Bruce Percy has an interesting PDF about aspect ratios. So I kind of think in a similar way that to his thoughts about aspect ratios. So I love the tilt shift lens because you can put the camera in either vertical or horizontal orientation and shift the same direction or opposite direction, if that makes sense. But the end result of that is you can make some cool, easy panos, and you can come up with some different aspect ratios with high resolution that you might not otherwise get to. Sorry for that little rabbit chase. But anyway, this is a really fun image I made. I was hiking along with my wife on our 20th anniversary, which I think was 17 years ago. That's pretty wild. But this is on the trail, if you want to know where this painted trillium patch is. There's several patches of these guys, hanging out on the Alum Cave Bluff Trail in early May. There are other places that you can find there, but there were quite a few that day. And this particular trillium was surrounded by rhododendron. So it was a completely dense, dark, but in that moment where we were just hiking by, poof, light beam comes through, lights up the painted trillium. Painted trillium, by the way, are pretty rare. You don't see those very often. And it was really dramatic light. It's a cool flower in and of itself, right? But that light is pretty wild. That's not a flash or anything else. That's natural light coming through the rhododendron. Yeah, this was, I don't know, man, this is also one of my favorites in terms of light. I don't know how many layers are in that image. It's probably at least 7, but it's a lot. And I love the light beam that's coming through in the foreground on the ferns. I love this soft diffused light that's hitting the tree kind of in the left side and then the tree in the center. I love the repeating V patterns that are going through that frame. I don't know, there's a lot that I like about that image. It's full of unusual and interesting light. And to me, it sort of is infused with a lot of that magic and mystery that we talked about early on, especially. That's one of my favorites from that trip in particular.
Layers, you mean like focus stack layers?
Well, just layers within the image. You've got a fern and a tree on the left, you've got a tree on the right, then a tree on the left. So it's got this kind of layering effect with the tree trunks and the physical subject matter that sort of pull the eye through the frame, in addition from going from light to dark to light to dark. There's a lot going on there in terms of layering, but really special lighting conditions that again didn't last very long. So really resonated with me, especially on the magic and mystery scale. Another interesting image, a light that we don't often talk about, is bounce light. So this is light that is maybe hitting like a slot canyon wall and it's bouncing across the opposite slot canyon wall and it's making it glow. But we also don't think about light that's bouncing off of tree trunks. So it may be hard to see online or maybe even hard to see here in person. But you can see quite obviously that the light is coming in from the left side of the frame. So it's illuminating the left side of the tree, but it's also hitting trees on the right, and that light is bouncing back to the left. So again, in terms of hidden light sources, something that we talked about earlier, this definitely has a hidden light source, and it has the beams of light that are spreading through the forest, not from high to low, but from left to right, which is pretty interesting, I think. And then we add to that bounce light. So to me, there's a lot of compelling light that's going on in this one particular frame, mystery and magic. Same place, but even a more kind of unusual lighting phenomena. You see this circular rainbow effect that's coming through the forest there with heavy fog and sun just rising above the distant ridge. And then those beams are illuminating the ferns and rhododendron in the understory of the forest. But I don't know that I've ever seen before or since this sort of circular rainbow effect that's coming through the forest quite like that. So very interesting, very unusual lighting. A little more of a simple image, but I love how this vine maple tree is just kind of angling through the frame. And of course, it's being backlit and side lit. So those maple leaves, being early spring, are just glowing. So I love the lines, I love the pattern, I love the color, and I love that very kind of special backlighting glow that's happening in the scene there. Again, same location. Lot I like about this image too, it's the sun is just above the horizon at sunrise, and so it is illuminating the trail, as you can see. So the light is illuminating the trail, and that's what's pulling the eye through the frame. It's also kind of wrapping around the trunk that's on the right side of the frame and kind of hitting some of the understory there too. Then of course you have this really cool sun star effect that's pulling the eye, directly through the frame as well. So, that's not going to last very long too. 1 to 2 minutes where that sun star is going to be there and it's going to illuminate the trail and illuminate the tree just like that, right? So very unusual, but I think interesting lighting effect. This was a rhododendron that we hiked by a bunch, probably took, I don't know, half a dozen sessions, probably shooting for 5 minutes each on this particular rhododendron. So lots of different conditions, but I really like this particular condition where again, the light is coming from the left side, the upper left side of the frame. You don't see where the light is at that point, but you see just part of the rhododendron catching the light there, which I think added a lot of drama, given that the background and foreground is pretty much in deep shadow. So dramatic light doesn't last long. Not as much drama, but I think special light that is just very, very softly diffused. And so for this particular subject, which is kind of the lupin understory of this young aspen tree collection right there, works really well. So you have this soft diffused side light that's coming in, and you also have that soft side light that's bouncing back from left to right. So not dramatic light, but light that's very special and works really well for that particular subject. I realize we're getting to 8 and I'm wrapping up soon.
I'm just doing this because I'm full.
Okay, gotcha. Don't want to keep anyone too long from evening plans.
Not rushing you, I'm just cold.
Understand. This is in the Smokies too. This is in the Tremont area. Lots of dogwoods there. We're just talking about that. And again, not dramatic light, but I think light that works really well for that subject. So we're not, it's a very soft and diffused light. So it was enough light to really illuminate those blossoms compared to the darker tones and the rest of the forest. So not dramatic light, but light that was really special and worked in particular for that subject. This is something I don't think I've seen too often in the Smokies, especially. We were hiking along towards a relatively lesser known waterfall, which is only about a 10-minute hike, and just passed by this group of, I think these are beech trees, and just kind of looked over my shoulder and the trees behind us were glowing. That's kind of unusual. And so what's happening here is the sun is hitting the back of the tree that's in the middle of the frame. And again, that reflected light is bouncing back to the trees behind it, and it's making those tree trunks glow. So not a complex composition, but an interesting light source in the way light is illuminating that particular subject in that particular moment. All right, final round. So I'm wrapping up. So this is for the group online or the group in person. What do you think about the image that makes it work? Is it subject? Is it light? Is it conditions? Is it composition? Is it some combination? What do you think? Yeah, there's definitely a color contrast. Yeah. This is in the redwood forest. So that's redwood sorrel. And you can find certain patches of them that are actually putting out blooms. So I think a lot of what's interesting about the image is the soft light that's kind of cascading through there. But obviously you have this dramatic break in pattern with the blossom being surrounded by the green foliage. We just spoke about
I think the vignette you added.
Yep.
I was gonna say, I think the vignette you added on that one helps.
Yes, agreed. And
Yeah.
there's a certain,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of light that was kind of falling off the edge of the frame anyway, but the vignette sort of helps focus the eye on that blossom in center of the frame. Good comment. Roaring Fork. So there's a favorite spot that I like taking groups to in Roaring Fork before sunrise, before it gets busy. But there's a spot here, and this is the upper place in the creek that we typically start from. And there's probably about 8 or 10 different compositions that are all pretty dramatic and compelling. And it's in a space that's about 40 yards long, so it's really cool. But what do you think about this particular image? Is it subject? Is it light? Is it composition, special conditions? What are your thoughts?
Composition for me, it's the movement from the upper left toward the lower right. And you've gone for a lot of blur, and it's a really slow shutter.
Mhm.
How many photographs was this? Images?
I think that might have just been 2 focus stacks, believe it or not.
So it's probably on that big rock.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in the distance.
Yeah, boulder or maybe the edge of that cascade there. And then the rhododendron behind that at probably a pretty small aperture, f/16 most likely, and everything sharp from front to back. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's an interesting subject. It's an interesting place to me. We've got these giant boulders kind of hanging out opposite each other, and you got this dramatic diagonal that's going through there.
The choice of aspect ratio too. You've got almost a 1:2 here.
Yeah.
It might be a 1:2.
Yep, that would be my favorite pano is 1:2.
1:2.
2.5 to 1, I think, is probably about as narrow as I would go. But I'm definitely drawn to 2 to 1 aspect ratios, 5:4, also, rather than 2:3. Yep. What do you think about that one? Light, special condition, subject, composition?
Special conditions, sky is almost replicating the foreground.
Yep. Yeah, not a sunrise or sunset time of day either. But yeah, I love the dramatic cloud kind of hanging out, as you said. The cloud's kind of vertical, kind of hanging down, kind of in line with that group of columbine below it.
Kind of pointing at him.
Yeah, so I'm going to vote for interesting subject, but really kind of special condition on that one. What do you think about that one? Subject.
No.
Frowned
What
upon.
he said.
Yeah. Yeah, not in the Smokies, by the way. Is it subject? Is it light? Is it special condition, composition?
It's the layer.
Mhm.
It's the depth that creates when you have that foreground subject that is obviously the star of the show, but then everything else behind it tells you where it is.
Yeah.
And what it is. And it just creates something worth looking at.
Yeah, I was trying not to merge the trunks, that are in the mid-ground. I think the one on the left is close to a merge, but it's a little sliver of space between it. And just try to give space for the eye to move through the frame from front to back. So to give the viewer a feeling of being there and experiencing that little patch of lupin and then the stark sort of straight lines of the aspen grove that kind of pull the eye from front to back.
So you've got the layers and the depth, but you've also got an inclination.
Yes.
You're looking at it, which I think also draws you in a different way because you're looking uphill.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, the elevation. Good point. Light, special subjects, special conditions, composition. This is a pretty recent photograph, by the way. Blank sky, usually frowned upon.
It's the light. The light on the foreground.
Yep.
Mimicking the light on Rainier in the background, the subtle
Mhm.
glancing. It's not overpowering, it's not
Mhm.
extreme, it's just
Mhm.
illuminating the important part.
Yeah, it's again, not at true sunrise or sunset. It's got some bright light on it, but it was still pretty compelling. So yeah, I like the light in that scene. It's kind of the star of the show. And the subject is, I think, fairly compelling also. And of course, I'll wrap up. Just mention there's a free ebook on the website, Forest and Trees. It's 58 pages long. So if you're into forests and trees, like I think I obviously might be, these are my thoughts in a little more structured format of the PDF. Whenever we take small groups out for tours, we have a whole collection of PDFs. We have 16 instructional PDFs that cover around 300 pages of content of everything that we've tried to learn about landscape photography in 25 years. They're meant to be quickly and easily digested and not too much of a deeper dive, but we do cover subjects like composition, personal expression in depth, and cover the craft in as simple and as easily digestible ways that we can think of. And I'll end with a quote. I know everybody's ready to rumble. By Joe Cornish, one of my favorite photographers. What we choose to photograph and how we choose to photograph it says what we think, feel, and believe about the subject, the world, and ourselves. Our photography is the world made visible through the lens of our soul. Joe Cornish. So again, thank you all. If you have questions, I don't know if we have time for questions. Yeah.
In the room, and I'm gonna open it up to questions on Zoom and in the room. If anyone has any, we have time. We can go through some questions. I know there's one more in the chat here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't have to put them in the chat. Feel free. Yep, tilt shifts are great lenses. I could do a whole presentation on tilt shift lenses, but
Yes.
do we have any questions from anyone on Zoom?
Anyone on the Zoom? Now's your chance. Inquiring minds want to know.
Dusty, are you using any artificial light in these pictures, strobes or handheld lights, that sort of thing?
Do not own.
Just all
any of it.
natural lighting.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I used to do a lot of, I actually started out doing work in macro photography, so I still have some reflectors, but I don't know exactly where they
Yeah.
are. Yeah, so these are all natural light.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Can you explain this stacking? I'm not familiar. I'm not a professional photographer, just starting out. What is the stacking that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So even if you are using a very small aperture on your lens, let's say f/16, which is what I use a lot, you're probably still not going to be able to get a scene completely sharp from front to back, especially if you're photographing wildflowers that are up close in a mountain that's like 5 miles away. So what we do is we take different slices of focus. So let's say 5 to 7 different images. And the way I do that is to photograph from front to back and then process those pretty quickly in Lightroom, drop them over into Photoshop or some other application where those images can automatically be blended back together for sharpness. So those tools will mask out areas that are not sharp and mask in areas that are sharp, which is very cool because in a wildflower scene, that would be impossible or certainly beyond my patience level to try to deal with by hand.
I need to do that presentation again.
It's a good question.
Thank you.
Dusty,
The web,
Dusty, what software do you use for the stacking? Helion, or what do you
That
use?
first one. Yeah. So I spend on most of my images, I spend maybe 1 to 2 minutes in Lightroom just doing some general things. I have some presets that handle some basic stuff. And then I'm
Yeah.
off to Photoshop and I probably spend maybe 5 minutes on an image in Photoshop. So I'm usually on most of my images, maybe 10 minutes or less, unless it's something unusual. But yeah, I use Lightroom and Photoshop. And that's about it.
For stacking, you use Photoshop.
Yeah. And Photoshop's maybe not the best. It annoys me, but I kind of manually work around it as best I can because round tripping into another application also annoys me. I'm easily annoyed.
you want to be out shooting, not.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Your question. No. Not, yeah, they're not going to put certain things in Lightroom like layers and stacking and other kind of things because then there wouldn't be any reason to pay them for Photoshop. Just one man's opinion. It's a good question. Other questions? Group or online? Yeah, Helicon Focus. Yep, that's a good tool. I've used that before.
Siri.
Yeah.
Green stacker is known,
Macro color.
that the macro.
I haven't used it, but I know a lot of people.
I'm pretty sure that next month, Mike Moats is gonna talk to you a lot about focus stacking.
Yeah.
Because macro is focus stacking central.
Yeah.
He won't? Because he does a lot of focus stacking.
Don't talk about shooting it at 32, but that's another story. Let him tell you.
I don't know the lens that does that. Anyone
other-
else online got any more questions?
Any other questions? Do travel over to my website. I have, again, free PDFs, desktop screensavers. If-
See that online, somebody was asking what it is.
They put, someone answered it in the chat.
Okay, okay. And certainly if you want to go on a tour with us, we're always going to new and exciting places. Next year we'll be in Senja, which is northern Norway. We're going to Ireland, and we'll be going back to Death Valley. I know a place that you're really fond of this year, and also Acadia. And just this morning, we got 2 last minute cancellations for Kauai. So if you want to get out of this cold weather and join us in Kauai in about a month, please get in touch. We have 2, as of this morning, open spaces. So thank you all for being here in person. Appreciate the invitation to be here. Appreciate your presence very much. Thank you all online very much for bearing with our technology. And do get in touch if I can help you with your photography in any way.
How
So
do you like using your GFX versus Canon? Are there any advantages?
that's a 1-hour answer to that.
You're
But-
gonna tell me that one over dinner.
Yeah. I'll just tell you this, my business partner, my good friend and business partner shoots both systems. So he does a lot of night photography. And that's a lot of what he uses Canon for. And then for most of the landscape work, he's using GFX. There's no perfect camera system. I'm not here to advocate for one or the other. They all have lots of positives, and they all are quirky and don't work as expected at times. But I'm really fond of GFX. I love the image quality right out of the can. And I love the crop overlays, which is a lot of fun for me to work with.
Nice presentation, and thanks so much. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dusty, for being here. I appreciate it. I
Yes,
know it was a 4-hour drive from Nashville. Appreciate you taking the time out of your week on a Thursday to come visit us.
Glad to be here.
And as we all talked about, next month, we have Mike Moats doing macro, and that will be Zoom only. So thank you, everyone who's here in person. Thank you, everyone online. I hope you enjoy that you get some more of your evening back on a Thursday night. And we will see you all in a month for the next presentation. Have a good evening, everyone.